And now, highbrow, lowbrow.
Hi, welcome back to the committee program, and this is the sophomore edition of Highbrow Lowbrow, a segment where Julia Doubleday and I examine a peak of high culture and a valley of popular culture. See the way that I said that? Like,
popular,
you know what I mean?
Like a, yeah,
popular, like it had a bad mouthfeel to it. Yeah.
Exactly. I saw it.
And we jam about it. We talk about it. We do what's what. We make it happen. On the show last time, we said we were going to do horror this time, and we did.
Horror. Sound like you're saying horror. And
I think we should maybe start with the lowbrow, like to reverse what we did last time. But let me just say what both of the films are.
Yes.
The first film is 2002's The Ring. Many of you will be old enough to have seen it, and it is a ripping good yarn film. There's a, we're not going to get into it too much.
Okay.
I just want to quickly plot so people remember.
Finally,
this is the one
he likes the lowbrow.
The TV, it's a videotape, that makes bad things happen, et cetera, et cetera. And we're pairing that like a fine wine with a meal from David Cronenberg with his 1982, so it's nice. It's exactly 20 years. With his work, Videodrome, which was his first kind of like major label album in a way.
Have you heard about this videotape that kills you when you watch it? You start to play it, and it's like somebody's nightmare. And as soon as it's over, your phone rings. And what they say is, you will die in 7 days.
Katie told you she was gonna die?
She told me. She said she didn't have enough time.
Would you say that I'm gullible?
No.
Easily rattled?
You're a little highly strung, maybe.
I watched the tape.
I'm not gonna get all worked up over some rumor. Yeah, show it to me.
Miss Keller, I'm bothered by these drawings. Why did you draw that house?
She told me to.
Who? Who told you to?
She shows me things.
Before you die, you see the ring.
The images on the tape are leading us somewhere.
Did she show you the horses?
Don't you understand, Rachel?
Tell me, miss, what is it you think you know?
Hello?
Before you die, you see the ring. You see the ring.
Everyone will suffer.
You see the ring. You see the ring. You saw it.
By the way, I had never seen Videodrome, and you had never seen The Ring, so we picked this. I don't know. I mean, it was just some sort of psychic connection that got us
And the films
to put these
both,
together.
right?
Yeah,
Videodrome, again, deals with videotapes doing things to people. And so
Videotapes
what's
doing
so
things to people.
cool is that this is both about videotapes doing things to people, but in many ways it's totally opposite, like in the intentions and the results. And I think that's going to be cool to talk about. But what made you recommend The Ring to me? And then I will say my reaction to it, which was, you will know as I was watching it, was very positive.
Well, first of all, The Ring is one of my favorite horror movies ever. I'm a big horror person. As you know, I watch horror movies like kind of every day to calm myself down. It really takes me out of the existential dread of existing in the world. I don't know
this
why.
This is an important part of your just daily ritual. Even.
Exactly, yeah. So, but The Ring, I think I saw, it's one of the first horror movies I ever saw, actually, because I was was, I don't know, like 15 when it came out or something.
Jesus Christ, how old are you? Yeah, I guess that's right. All right.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, and my parents didn't let me watch horror movies when I was a kid. So maybe, I don't know, this is part of my teenage rebellion as well. But yeah, so I like one of the first scary ones. I mean, I saw the Gremlins when I was a kid, but it gave me nightmares for 10 years, but it's not actually that scary. The Ring I just think it's like a really perfect little film. Like the way the narrative from beginning to end.
It's a little machine that works.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
It's like the pacing, the narrative, where it takes
the exposition. I knew what was going on very quickly without having to learn a bunch of weird shit. Thank you, Marvel Universe. Like, I don't need to buy things.
Right. So we knew what was happening at the beginning. That first opening scene is very, very memorable. Again, it's that sort of decision to front load the shock, and then sort of build back up to that as you're sort of unpacking along with the journalist what's happening along the way. You have the heightened stakes of like her son watches the film. There's the relationship with her ex that it's sort of a romantic subplot, but like
you know what, it feels like it doesn't pay off, but then we care about him enough that it matters, so that's good.
I think they did a good job with that. That was a little bit like, that's the twist at the end, right? Is that like they think they have solves the problem.
And it's all solved. And you're even sort of satisfied. You're like, oh, that was pretty good. But then it does that kind of...
Right. And I think it's very satisfying that they do the twist specifically because...
We can say what the twist is. This is decades
old.
Right. You know what I mean?
And, right. So... Yes, we think that...
The ghost in the machine, who we think is probably good and trying to express herself, is actually bad and wants to hurt
It's
people.
A little girl who... Essentially, Rachel, the main character, is uncovering in the archives of the library, which, as we all know, is the best place to uncover things in horror movies. Always go to the archives of the library. Microfiche is the way to go. So she's, flipping
I have more
through
to say on this in a second.
These
You'll see. It's
old
not an accident.
newspapers, and she's discovering stuff about this weird town. She goes and finds this woman. Eventually, she solves this sort of mystery of this missing girl, which is that she was thrown in a well by her mother. So... the result or the conclusion that they reach is like, oh, this girl's spirit is haunting us because of this horrific death she was sent to. But ultimately, if you look at all of the clues along the way, it doesn't actually add up. So if they had ended it there, it would have been pretty unsatisfying, because there's all this stuff about, all the horses mysteriously dying and all of these supernatural things happening in the town, and the supernatural images she's able to create out of her mind, the fact she never sleeps. All of these things aren't really explicable. Some of them could be like small town rumors, but being on camera not sleeping for 24 hours a day, that's not really, it's supernatural, right? So they free the spirit of the little girl, and immediately Rachel's son is like, oh, you should not have done that. You're dumb. Like, she's actually a maniacal killer, and that's why they threw her in the well in the first place. And then
also very satisfying, because it's literally an adult sort of being like, no, it's going to be okay. The adults did it, and the kid's just like, no, the adults don't really know what's going on.
Yes.
Which, of course, has many parallels.
Yes, and also visiting them in their dreams and all this stuff, and leaving marks on them, and so she's also a very terrifying villain, right? I mean, even to the point where I think that she's a very cultural touch point. People know the girl that crawls out of the TV. People know the girl with the hair in her face, even if they haven't seen The Ring. That's something that people are very familiar with.
Yeah, there's a combination of Poltergeist and The Shining and these images. Like, we know these images. Yeah. And actually, that's one of the things that I thought was so cool about Touch, because it actually touched on something that you talked about last time, which is sort of updating our cultural vernacular for the digital age or whatever. And this film doesn't have to do that, because it's 2002 and it is not part of the same world we are in now. But it is part of this really cool line of kind of this cultural through line where technology actually confirms our belief in the spiritual rather than reverse, right? How the age of sort of exploration and science kind of led to kind of Madame Blavatsky, right? And kind of that spiritualism and stuff, right? It's like the instant that we have cameras, one of the first things that we think to do with them is maybe we can photograph ghosts. It's like actually what people want to do with the technology. And so it's sort of interesting that even here with the videotape and stuff, it's like the visceral realness of this technology, we do associate with the supernatural to interact with it in a real way. Like these things to us, I think, go together rather than are separate. Technology always tells us about the
maybe
ghost.
In a way, it's, humanity as a whole. We keep advancing technologically, and as we do that, we have this sort of sublimated hope, or maybe not sublimated if you're super into that kind of thing, that we're going to find something that we can't explain, or we're going to find something that proves that there is something beyond what we can see. And, like videos of Bigfoot or whatever, right? Like the human mind, we want to discover, and at the same time, we want to be stymied and confused. And we want to feel
it's a bit of confirmation
because we want to feel like there's someone
for.
That's smarter than us that is dictating what's going to happen. Because if it's just us, that's very terrifying. That's more terrifying than anything.
Yeah, being surrounded by the dead is quite comforting in a way, right? Actually being alone.
Well, because it wouldn't just be the dead, right? It would be a whole realm of existence that we can't touch or understand.
Yeah, but even the parts that seem scary is better than nothing, though, right? Like,
I agree. So yeah, I mean, I really love the movie. I love the way it's paced. I love the way that they end up back at the cabin. The whole thing of actually the covering on the well going over being the ring, I really liked. Like that's the last thing she saw. And I like that they kill the husband at the end. And I really like that the reason she survives, because we have to have an explanation for how she has survived. It's been more than 7 days for her. So that's how she really thinks they're off the hook. This is like, day 5 after you have COVID, you can go back to work. I'm going to keep, disinformation. I just want disinformation to get out there.
Yeah.
It's been 7 days, so she doesn't have the ring curse anymore. And as it turns out, it was this incidental thing. It had nothing to do with the entire mystery they're unraveling through the entire movie. It's that she made a copy of the tape, which I think actually segues nicely into Videodrome, right? Because again, we're talking about this sort of viral nature of art, of communication, of potentially malicious art that can kill you. These things are very parallel in some ways to what happens in Videodrome. But yeah, so she's made a copy of the tape. She then forces her son to make a copy of the tape. And, in an era before going viral is an expression, this is essentially what Samara, the, scary hair girl, wants to happen. She wants she wants to infect the entire world in a sort of evil videotape pyramid scheme, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, don't we all in our own ways?
Definitely.
I mean, it's sort of like, YouTube killed the video ghost. The thing that I also think is interesting, especially vis-a-vis you saying this is actually one of the first horror movies you sort of encountered even on your own, is that this is, and this is going to involve me being at a party with cool people, so buckle up for anecdotes.
Name dropping.
But
name dropping alert.
Yeah.
Can we get like a little banner?
No, I just have to. I had to make sure that you're the one who really I know bothers you the most of all the folks in the show. So I had to.
That's so
but it was probably 2003, 2004, and I met John Waters, who's a lovely individual and an extremely talented filmmaker.
Good for you, Arun. Good job.
And he was saying, and he's one of there's two kinds of filmmakers in the world, right? The ones who want to talk about movies, the ones who don't want to talk about movies. He actually wants to talk about movies.
Word.
And he was saying, and he was like, what's exciting now, especially about September 11th, and I'm sure he did not mean September 11th. Stuff was exciting, although it came out a little
cut that out of
even.
context.
I remember even then being like, let's be careful with that a little. Is that horror movies are scary now again, because we're scared now again. And kind of made this point about how in the 90s, horror was so thoroughly mixed with irony and more irony and more irony. And that these kind of films that were coming out, and he did talk about The Ring, although I hadn't seen it. And he did mention The Hills Have Eyes, I think. Is that one? Is that from the same
I haven't
era?
seen that one.
And he mentioned both of those as being kind of that felt more like 80s or previous 70s horror, because it actually was scary and allowed you to sort of you were allowed to just escape into the horror without being knowing
I feel like
about
I
it.
specifically talked about this before, because I was talking about how I actually was talking specifically about sci-fi and like pre and post 9/11, about how like in the 90s, end of history, right? So for a certain group of privileged Americans, it's this feeling like things are only getting better. They only can get better. Growth, growth, growth. Bye, bye, bye. And the art was really reflective of that. In a lot of ways, it was very shallow. Independence Day, I think, is a fantastic movie. It's very, very 1996.
It was a great trailer. We were talking about trailers before. That's one of the great trailers
we
of all
should
time.
watch that for the show too. But anyway, it's really just like the best
I haven't seen it.
Oh my God! What?
I like the trailer. I'm not a big Will Smith guy, and it seemed kind of dumb.
We're gonna watch it. Okay.
Okay. So next one should be Apocalypse. The next theme should be Apocalypse, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so this is like I think it's also a perfect movie. I mean, it's just the perfect big disaster movie. Jeff Goldblum is very funny in it. Will Smith is funny in it.
But they have like one-liners and stuff, right? Like, they don't have one-liners.
But they're not Avengers
in the
one-liners. Like they're cute. I like
not that
we
corny.
like it.
Okay.
Yeah. So and they're doled out, here and there. But so
Trying not to be a sincere film that's
really great
came out
cast. But the whole mood of it is jubilant. It's a movie about the end of the world, but it's a very jubilant movie. Like the end of it is like the good guys won, and it was America, and we did it, and this is just what the world is. Like bad things happen, but then good things happen. And then I talked about that in contrast to The Matrix, which came out a few years later, but also before 9/11. And The Matrix, I think, is really interesting because that's a very dark movie. It was very much in contrast to most of the things that were being made in the 90s. The mood of it, even that like very dark wash mood that really didn't become as widespread until later in the 2000s. And it's all about living in a candy-coated reality that isn't actually real, because there's so much happening below the surface. Some people have connected it to the trans experience, as both of the directors have come out as trans women.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of other elements of sort of like
I think that's just one lens of looking at it through.
Cultural,
I think we take something away from their actual...
Yes, political revolution of saying like, look, you may feel like you're living at the end of history, but, take this pill and see that supporting all of this, it's just suffering, suffering, suffering. That's to me, a very like sort of blatant anti-capitalist message. And it was released onto this audience of people that were not, I don't think they necessarily understood that underlying message. There was definitely a lot of talk about like technology, robots, the future, all of these things. But the dystopia is now. The dystopia is now. Let me write a book called that.
No, people miss it. When you're writing your book on that, you have to have a chapter about Starship Troopers too, where you're like, it's a joke. like, yes, they're very fashy. That's the joke. Okay, let's move over into Videodrome. Roll the trailer.
Why did you watch it, Max? Business reasons. Sure. What about the other reasons?
Max Wren is a victim.
I woke up with a headache.
He has been exposed to Videodrome.
I've been hallucinating for a while, ever since...
What?
Since I first saw Videodrome.
His brain is already receiving video images. I think that massive doses of Videodrome signal will ultimately produce and control hallucination to the point that it will change human reality. Soon, his visions will coalesce and become uncontrollable flesh. Videodrome is seducing Max Wren.
Please, come to me now. Come to Nikki.
And Max Wren can do nothing to stop it.
What makes you think I need help?
None of our test subjects has returned to normality.
Television can change your mind. Videodrome will change your body.
Long live the new flesh.
It will shatter your reality. Videodrome, starring Deborah Harry and James Woods. A shocking new vision from the creator of Scanners. Coming soon to a theater near you from Universal Pictures.
So Videodrome is called body horror. I mean, I think immediately you told me, hey, this feels like sci-fi, not horror. Like, his stuff is always about anxiety, about body, right? Like, my hands disappearing inside me and stuff. And actually, I find that sort of compelling because I've always kind of been scared by that, had sort of, waking nightmares about stuff like that, like, don't like that kind of thing. But no, it is a crossover in some ways into science fiction. But I think some of that is something that we do to it because, unlike The Ring, it is inherently political, religious, philosophical, and it sort of talks about that, right? Like, even in the movie, one of the lines is, this became a political project, and that's when it became dangerous.
Right. Okay, so my first reaction to watching this movie was that I hated it. Then I thought about it more, and I didn't hate it.
That's Debbie Harry, by the way.
I know.
Blondie.
I looked it up.
Yeah,
I looked it up,
yeah.
actually, because I wanted to check. But yeah, I was bewildered by it. I do think, oh, sorry, unpopular. I do think that a lot of cultural context was probably missing for me because this isn't something I saw in the 80s, and I also wasn't like a baked human in the 80s. Like, I got born in the 80s. I feel like it was probably, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not the highbrow expert, very much a product of this sort of moral panic around TV, which I think was really big in the 80s. Like, I
would say yes. A bit of this. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Finish.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, in that way, I would say it's different from The Ring because I'm not sure how much The Ring was trying to specifically, either have that conversation about media and how it affects people. Maybe they were, but it's much more explicitly done, at least in this context, where it seems like he's both sort of skewering from both sides in a way, because it seems like, and on the one hand, he's sort of skewering this idea that, like, if you watch violence on TV, you're going to become a murderer. You're going to get it's this sort of heightened reality where you get a brain tumor and then you actually, your hand turns into a gun and all this stuff. And at the same time, he does seem to be skewering the sort of direction of culture in the way that he talks about, so the Videodrome, the TV show they want to air, is essentially saying, well, the next thing that humanity is going to want to watch is just people getting tortured, raped, and murdered. There's no plot. There's no characters. It's just watching people get tortured, raped, and murdered. So
right, that's the point. Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, I'd just be interested to know, how you sort of reconcile these things, and what is he trying to say about where the culture is going? Is he sort of mocking both this idea that we are products of what we consume, or is he sort of partially behind that idea, but maybe just in a less like hysterical way? Is he upset about where culture is going, or is he making a joke about where culture is going? Like, I think there was a lot of context that maybe I missed because I am not totally sure.
I don't think you missed anything. I think you put your finger right on it. And and he's is trying to have his cake and eat it too by not coming down anywhere, and the kind of horrorness of it helps because everybody can just sort of die, and we don't have to worry about it. But I think it is a bit of this moral panic, but it's not just sort of like the sex and torture stuff. I think it's also, this is the same time as you're seeing, the rise of like Playboy TV and HBO having a kind of like, up all night kind of like, it wasn't a high prestige thing then, it was more kind of schlocky. But at the same time, you had Morton Downey Jr. and those guys, the pre-Rush Limbaughs kind of coming on TV with the idea that you just yell at people and that was good TV. This was sort of new and exciting. And so the idea that TV was just sex and yelling and horror, like, really was coming down on it. And then you also have the other people who he's enjoying lampooning here, who maybe is the last wave, which are the theorists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the guy who sort of runs the religion, the TV religion, is definitely supposed to be Marshall McLuhan, who is, Cronenberg's Canadian, Marshall McLuhan's Canadian. The whole thing takes place in Toronto, etc. So I think it's also kind of it's also making fun of the fact that he would make a movie analyzing these things, right? It's like even the analysis of this is also a bit much. But I do think at the end of the day, he does want to say that while real experiences, and maybe this is profound, are no more or no less important than imagined experiences. And not to say that they aren't as important or that they are more important, but that the two things are exactly the same.
Yeah, or that the two things are now sort of melding together to form a new type of person that is so heavily molded by culture and this sort of national, international culture, which is maybe something that was new at that time. I mean, now we communicate more than ever through a lot of different platforms. I wonder how he would make that movie today.
Yeah, it would be a lot different, right? And I think it would also, as you're saying, have more this idea of kind of global web pushing into one thing, right? The homogenous kind of new now, but with diametrical and different forces still fighting for us, right? Sort of the end of history is not a matrix of one perfect thing. Right. It's just a new battlefield in which the same exact things happen, and sort of the silliness of a religion based on people watching TV to cure themselves of all ills is probably the same thing as Jesus,
Yeah. I did like the one-off. At some point, they said the evil corporation or whatever that's trying to kill everybody who wants to watch the snuff films. They make weapons for NATO and eyeglasses for children in third world countries or something like that. So I thought it was a very throwaway pointed critique of sort of corporate responsibility many decades before that became more of a
or just sort of the blindness of these huge webs. It's they make cookies and bombs and it's all the same.
Right.
It's absolutely all the same. In some ways though, things are sort of more precious though, right? I think in a way that Cronenberg couldn't imagine in 82, the access which we all have to be able to watch snuff films essentially is endless. And the fact that they're real is, I think, something he wouldn't think of. Right now as we're watching the war between Russia and Ukraine come on, I as someone who studies information, disinformation, I'm sure as many people who will watch this, subscribe to all kinds of different Telegram channels and things, and just the stuff coming through is, extremely graphic, extremely horrific, and just sometimes is exactly the same coming from both sides with different labels on it. And so I do think this kind of dystopian information future, we're there and we don't even have as many of these guides, because even in this show, right, whether it's the corporate executive or the daughter and her prophet father, there are still adults in the room, right? Of course, it's a shorthand for telling a story. You need people to stand in for people, right? But it's still hard, I think, to Jacques Tati maybe does it, in his films, other folks who try to make these kind of big things, but to show what a system of people who are vaguely greedy, vaguely lazy, but not the worst people you've ever met, the damage they can all do when they are numbered in the millions and they control the apparatus of the world.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in a way, we've seen a lot of these world-changing technologies as revolutionizing how we communicate, but in some ways they just sort of accelerate seeds that were already there. So I think that we talk,
it's the same
stuff, we talk a lot about the new age of information warfare, but information warfare of course has always been a thing going back to when it took you 2 weeks to get a newspaper, and whatever, Jefferson said that Adams was dead, or what? You know what I'm talking about? There was some campaign with the two of them.
No, Adams lives is his last words, even though Adams was
this
dead,
is something different. This was
like
during a presidential campaign. They were really mad at each other. They had a friendship, and then they hated each other, and then they reconciled.
Yeah.
They died on the same day. And
July 4th.
On July 4th, the 50th,
Annoying.
I think,
Yeah,
anniversary,
annoying.
25th anniversary or 50th, I don't know.
Kind of lame when you think about it. Really.
But when they were running against each other, it was like one of them said the other had syphilis, and then the other one, and it just really inspired. I mean, it was just like, actually, he's dead. we actually need to try this one in the mass emails again. Let's see if we can come full circle. He was just like, you know what, you can't vote for him. He died. He's actually dead. And it was much harder, I actually think, for people to verify whether or not that was true. They had to wait.
Took a little while
for,
to spread it out back then, yeah.
I don't know, like the next, like, I don't know, wagon to come into town. I don't know how it worked, but you definitely couldn't go on Twitter and see every person on Earth having their own opinion on whether or not he was dead, and you couldn't check TMZ. So I don't really buy that misinformation is somehow so much worse now.
And the internet, and I even think sort of I do think. Look, I try to be an unorthodox thinker. Not to apply the same lens to everything over and over again. I do think mechanical, like mass media. The difference between having a bespoke media and having mass media was a big change. I don't think the difference between having a mass media and a digital media is as big a change. I think that one was a huge sea change, and that the idea that I actually can hit everybody, didn't used to be able to do that, and then. Now the idea I can hit everybody faster.
No, but
is sort of the same,
I think
but
there's
better.
a bigger, the underlying thing. I think that is so
like movies, photography, like 1900, turn of the 20th century. I still feel like something fundamental.
No, I think something fundamentally changed, and I think it's maybe I'm arguing with myself now, but I think it's just the fact that these narratives that aren't coming from any powerful actor. So a lot of times I use like Standing Rock as an example, but there's tons of examples like this, like whether it's different, protests in Ferguson, whatever, like something that is being elevated by no powerful actor. It's not the U.S. government. It's not any other government. There are people who just haven't had their voices in the popular press ever. And those people specifically are the ones that cable news is actually worried about. They're not worried about any other kind of social information sharing. What they're worried about is anything that sort of undermines their own power, their own ability to be the sole arbiters of what people should have access to, what information they should have access to. And actually, this week, they just announced we're going to have a motherfucking Ministry of Truth. Biden's he's appointing some Minister of Truth. I mean, like the name of it is like Office to Combat Misinformation or something. But this is the bullshit that the liberals, sorry, but you motherfuckers have lost the plot. They've just been banging down the doors asking for this because of the absolute hysteria that was going on in the press. Instead of talking about what's happening in the changing media landscape, their jobs are under threat, their power is under threat, and they have nothing to say about Fox News, which just blares misinformation all day and all night. Nothing to say.
They're in the club, so it's different.
They're in the club. They have the same
MSNBC
business model.
Maddow, right?
Same business model. So they have nothing to say about any of that. All they want is just this extreme censorship of people being able to communicate directly with each other without any sort of person from the upper classes being able to be in the conversation. That is extremely disturbing to them. And I don't think they're actually going to be able to do that. Short of like banning every social media platform, it's actually very difficult to moderate content because, you try to cast a wide net, you end up eliminating way too much. It becomes totally unusable. You try to cast a narrow net and a lot of hate speech. It's not...
It's a Goldilocks problem.
Essentially, when people talk about trying to regulate speech on these platforms, they're imagining an individual who has a perfectly matched politics to their own, going through and reading every single tweet. And of course, we know that's not possible. On the other hand, the fact that they can't do that, they don't have the power to do that, they don't have the ability to actually engage with the amount of content and information and data that we produce, I think it's a big advantage for us because there's no way for them to tamp down on all these different conversations, all these different movements, because it pops up, there's no way to control it without outright banning it, which is exactly...
No, I think people even know that. They collect massive amounts of information, but they don't even, there's nothing much they can do.
Oh yeah,
with
no,
it,
big data is in a large part,
it's
in a large part a lie. Big data is too big for people to understand what it even means. But if you look at what Russia did, like Russia just banned Facebook, Instagram, all these social media platforms, because it is full of so-called Western propaganda. So how is that any motherfucking different than what we're doing? Like, all of a sudden, all these liberals are like, oh my God, this is so anti-democratic. They have banned Facebook, the thing that I have been advocating for banning for 6 months. Like, don't advocate to ban platforms where people can share information socially that has never previously had a way to reach the public. Like, just don't do it. Just stop, please. Read a book.
Yeah, totally. that actually wouldn't be a bad thing to exactly cut on. Read a book, cut at the end of our lowbrow, highbrow segment. But actually, I do want to tell a story that I tell all the time because an old man repeats himself, but because I think it illustrates your point exactly, which is when it comes to these actual news stories like Ferguson that bubble up from below, the news media do not know what to do with them, to the point where my favorite Jake Tapper CNN moment, which is in front of a burning gas station in Ferguson, he asks the person there, hey, do you think that this is a big enough news story that the news should be here? Or that the media should be here? And the guy looks at him and goes, I don't know, bitch, read the news. And then like walks away to continue protesting. And that's it.
Yeah. The relevance of traditional media has been declining for a long time, and they've been playing the victim about it for a long time. I mean, for a couple of decades now. It's, oh my God, people are too stupid to read our wonderful product. Maybe if your product isn't being consumed by people, it's because it's literally shit and they don't want to eat shit anymore.
And maybe if we didn't realize that your sort of path to power goes from politics to the morning shows, like we all see that's what they do, that it's like maybe that we don't take them so seriously. It's like we all see what happens, and why should we continue to take them seriously?
Raised in the internet age, raised in the information age, this stuff just doesn't work on them anymore. Whereas like boomers are still watching these shows. They're the only things keeping these shows afloat. And unfortunately, they really, really, really love to vote. But and
they don't love to die.
They hate dying, honestly. Like, it's their least favorite.
It's really a thing with them. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like they know that the average age of their viewers is like 70. I mean, it's something crazy. So even if they all live to be 90, what is the business model for 20 years from now? I don't see what it is. They just tried to release CNN Plus, which apparently they spent millions and millions of dollars on. It was supposed to be their streaming news. Nobody signed up for it. They were trying to lost their job, I guess. No. Don't do that motherfucking shit. Don't do that motherfucking shit.
They already had streaming news. Like, what was the point of this thing?
Don't do that. I feel bad for the people who lost their jobs thing because.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, like, I'm sure whatever, it was fine. People who worked there were fine. I have no idea. I'm just saying, what was the point of it when you can go to CNN.com/live and watch CNN?
But what I was going to say is that the very powerful millionaire media figures who were publicly humiliated by the collapse of this dumbass platform immediately got online and was like, I guess.
Who were those people?
I don't know. Whoever. You think I know the people on CNN? Yes, they were famous people who were going to have shows on CNN Plus. And they immediately got online and they were like, I guess you just want to make fun of poor people and the makeup artists who lost their job. I mean, this is disinformation. This is very clear, like, distracting from the actual narrative of what happened. Y'all are the ones.
I just don't want to be ghoulish about something closing. But, like, it seemed like
y'all
a good
are the
idea.
ones
It did
that
not seem like a house that
opened a business that was unsustainable. So you guys are responsible for that. And by the way, since you're all millionaires, why don't you give them a motherfucking severance check? Why don't you do that? Because you have money and I don't, ma'am. Like, I don't understand why they're trying to blame the public for that. That's your own shit. You did that.
You built that. So Apocalypse. Is Apocalypse the next theme?
Sure, I guess. Yeah, is there a highbrow apocalypse?
All right, there's plenty of highbrow apocalypse. Come on. There's even Apocalypse Now.
That's not really Apocalypse.
That's not what we'll watch. It's not an apocalypse, and it wasn't really now.
So, what are we going to watch aside from Independence Day, which I think you'll like a lot?
Oh,
I don't know. I mean, it's
we don't have to do it on the show. We didn't come up with it on the show last time. So,
all right.
So just the theme. So the theme, sci-fi theme, apocalypse. What do you like?
Yeah, it could be sci-fi. It could be apocalypse. It could be alien.
Pick one. 3.
Why do I have to pick the topic on the show, but we don't have to pick the movie on the show?
Because we did it last time.
Fine.
And once you set a precedent.
Yes, some sort of apocalypse.
Okay. Okay. See?
It could be aliens, but it could be something else. Speaking of which, I just want to plug my next project really quickly. Roland Emmerich, the guy that made Independence Day and has made just a series of really shitty disaster movies ever since, he has made a new movie called Moonfall, which is, as you might have guessed, about the moon falling into the earth and maybe killing everybody. Looks really bad. Halle Berry's in it. I forget who else. Some other famous people are in it. I will be watching it. That's why it's my next project. We'll be watching the film, and I invite you all to join me when it's no longer $20 to buy it on streaming. Moonfall.
Wow, this sounds like quite a motion picture, and I'm sure you will hear all about it, folks, on another Highbrow Lowbrow here on the committee program.
La imagen por la cual vale la pena arriesgar la vida, sacrificarse hasta la muerte en los campos de batalla de todos los continentes del mundo.
Thanks so much for tuning into the committee program. We know you have many options when it comes to content consumption, and we appreciate your attention to this new season with new episodes on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and at 10 p.m. Central European Time. You can support the show by becoming a member on patreon.com/the committee program. You can follow committee on Twitter, /committee-pro, on YouTube, the committee program, on Instagram, the committee program, on Facebook, the committee program, and you can visit the committee program company store at tpublic.com, the committee program shop. Special thanks, as always, to our team, Xhevat Kastrati, Fiamma Meli, Jacopo Castelletti, Forrest, Lovette, and committee's deputy director, Julia Doubleday. Look alive out there. It's later than you think.
It's the end of our broadcast day. Thanks for listening. This was the 12th program in our second series. For more global infotainment from the committee program, click on the video screen right or screen left. Please like and subscribe to the committee program on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern and 10 p.m. Central European Time.